Hello, and welcome to the Sugar Bell Review, a program dedicated to learning about the people, places, and policies that make up the Bellbrook Sugar Creek community. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight we have with us again Hope Taft, and she has brought with her Aaron Roarke. I'm going to look at my card here, the Scenic River Coordinator for the Department of Natural Resources, correct?
Right, for Southwest Ohio.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening, you guys.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yep.
I'm excited to learn about the history of the Little Miami River. It's such a big part of the community, so learning about how it got to be here seems like an exciting evening segment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it has a long history.
Yeah.
And I think I first learned about it in more or less a little detail. Aaron knows the real detail. Was from Glenn Thompson, who was the editor of the Journal Herald in Dayton for many, many years back in the 60s. And he loved the outdoors, and they say he canoed the river every day after work.
Wow.
But he was the one that was responsible for getting the legislation passed in Columbus that made the state scenic river law. And the Little Miami became the first state scenic river and the first national scenic river in Ohio.
Okay.
So it has
It was
a
his
long,
mental health release, I think.
I think it was too.
Yeah.
It's his stress release, and it's still a
Right.
lot of people's stress release, including
it
my
really
own.
That was back in the days when big cities still had competing newspapers. We had Dayton Daily News and the Journal Herald.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, but the history of the Little Miami starts long before that. At one time, it flowed north into the Taze River Valley, and the Taze River started in North Carolina and flowed through Ohio and ended up in the headwaters of the Mississippi River. And when the glaciers came, it buried that river and forced the Little Miami, which flowed north, to go south. But it's that Taze River that gives our whole area its wonderful drinking water. It's our aquifer now.
Okay. So it's underground, where
It's
the Little
underground
Miami
instead
is
of
still above
overground.
ground.
Yeah, the Little Miami that you can see today, this is true of the Great Miami and the Stillwater. All of our local rivers flow across a deep, thick bed of gravel. So the original bedrock valley
Okay.
that existed before the glaciers came is way down there somewhere,
Wow.
100 to 200 feet down. Yeah. Who knows what the landscape used to look like?
Yeah.
It was probably craggy and probably looked a lot more like John Bryan and Clifton Gorge
Okay.
than what we're familiar with now.
And the glaciers came through and sort of flattened it.
The
and
glaciers
smoothed
came
it.
through and they brought all kinds of sand and gravel and debris from like this, from Canada and Michigan and points north, even northern Ohio. And when the glaciers retreated, all that debris was just kind of left.
Okay.
And that's our aquifer now.
Oh. And it cleans the water, I'm assuming,
Right,
with all the
and
gravel.
the glacial melt was tremendous. If you go down Lower Bellbrook into Bellbrook City and then up the other side on 725, that whole valley was filled with water when the glaciers melted.
Wow.
So that is a lot of water that was created.
Seeped down into the earth.
It has since shrunk to the size of the Little Miami River, but water always finds its lowest point and creates the watershed that we call the Little Miami Watershed, which really goes from Town and Country Shopping Center all the way over to London.
And the vast majority of the water is actually not visible. You look at the Little Miami and you think that's the river. It's the surface expression of the water table.
Okay.
Actually, the whole bedrock valley, all that fill I described is saturated with water. The vast majority of the water is underground. Can't see it.
And so the rock you brought with us is actually glacial?
Yes, that's a glacial cobble. It's called a glacial erratic because it's not supposed to be here. It's from somewhere else, as opposed to the familiar limestone that many of us have seen in stream valleys, and we've also seen outcrops, especially if you go to Cincinnati. You drive through rock outcrops where the bedrock is exposed.
Yeah, there's places by the lake, I think, that kids go on.
Looking for fossils.
Yep. The
Caesar Creek Lake and the
Caesar Creek
spillway.
Lake, they have the limestone and the fossils down there.
Yep.
So that's that looks really familiar, 'cause
That's
I know
all.
we've seen that.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's all from an area called the Cincinnati Arch, where when the Appalachian Mountains were being formed, it created a dip and then an upheaval, and that arch over Cincinnati is world famous for its fossils. And it's really an old lake bed, old ocean bed.
Yeah, the entire interior of the United States used to be a shallow ocean comparable to the Bahamas or the Florida Keys.
Okay.
Because water levels were much higher than they are now. Nowhere in the world do we have the same kind of what are called epicontinental seas, where part of a continent is actually submerged. But back then, the whole eastern United States was, and this is some of that limestone that you see, like I said, in the Cincinnati area. And each one of these layers is thought to be the signature of a hurricane.
Huh.
Yeah, it's pure fossils. It's nothing but recognizable pieces of shells and trilobites and corals.
So the idea is
And also
that a
tiny
hurricane
fragments.
would come through and
It would
essentially
stir up everything because a shallow sea, you know, if it's only 15 or 20 feet deep, the entire water column is disturbed by a passing storm.
yeah,
And when the dust settles, you might say,
it creates
the
a
big,
layer,
yeah, it creates another layer. And
almost
so,
like rings on a tree.
exactly, yeah,
Ah.
yeah,
A lot of
really
dead,
cool.
lot of dead seashells.
yeah.
Hey, but
that
it gives us a
decay
neat
and make
timeline.
yeah, that decay and form that that alkaline limestone.
So it sounds like the river was around long before people even got here.
Well, yeah, it predates people. People have been here maybe 10,000 years since the glaciers left. But the Tays predates the glaciers,
Okay.
which started their transit south 2 million years ago.
Wow.
So it's not really clear how old the Tays is. But it's clear that it is very old because you can still see parts of the Tays that exist below the southernmost advance of the glacier. But it's called the New River.
Okay. Wait, it's an
New-
old river, but it's called the New River?
Yeah, it's actually, it's very old. Yeah.
That's in West Virginia, and it is a good,
Yeah.
good fast river.
This is how old the Tays is. It is so old that the Appalachians rose up underneath it, and it kept pace with them, cutting
Wow.
down through it. And that's why you can see the New River Gorge.
Okay.
That is a place where, like a bandsaw, a slow-moving bandsaw, the river just kept cutting down as the Appalachians were heaved up.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
It
to
is
think about
fascinating.
how
I
the
think
Earth
I get
changes.
very fascinated by
Yeah.
geology.
The Earth changes, and it's now the Earth changes on its own, obviously, but then of course you add people to the mix, and that also causes changes. I'm assuming. So how has the river changed due to human involvement?
Well, we don't have. We've mentioned the water table and how the water table is the vast majority of the water in the Little Miami Valley. Because we have so much hard surface now in the form of roofs, roads, sidewalks, even yards and play fields are so heavily
Compacted.
trampled and compacted. Yeah, that's the good word. Even they are not very absorptive of rainfall anymore. So an awful lot of the rain that falls on the Miami Valley goes immediately into storm sewers and into the rivers. It doesn't soak into the ground the way it used to.
Okay.
So our rivers have kind of a different character than the pioneers would have been familiar with. They're very flashy, which means they rise quickly after a rain and then fall quickly.
Okay.
So they're very temperamental in a way compared to what the pioneers, and not nearly as clear.
So back before when was it European settlers were starting to come in and settle the area, the river was much slower and more even keel, I guess.
And
would
it
be a
wasn't
good way
so
of
much
putting it.
erosion of the banks.
Yeah.
But even in the late 1800s, when there were like 300 mills along the Little Miami and its tributaries.
And you mean like flour mill, right? With
Yeah.
a mill wheel.
Oh,
Correct.
they did everything:
Okay.
wool and cotton and flour and liquor and anything in between.
Sawed lumber.
Lumber.
Yeah.
You know.
Just like you'd see at Clifton, at the Clifton Mill.
Yeah.
That's not a working mill. Is it a
Yeah, it's
working
still
mill?
working. It's the last working mill, but
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't think they can do it the way they originally did it.
Because the water levels
Yeah,
aren't right
yeah.
for it anymore.
But by the time the pioneers came and built houses and things, they cut down so many of the trees that the water was not consistent like it used to be, and like you need to turn the wheel of a mill, and so all the mills disappeared by the early 1900s. And we're doing the same thing. We are cutting down all the trees and changing the water table and making it a lot flashier, and so we're seeing levels drop dramatically and then rise very quickly.
That sounds, it definitely sounds like the human interference has more of an impact.
It's very visible. Yeah.
If you know what to look
Disconcerting
for, you can
sometimes.
see it very quickly and very easily.
It also seems to affect in people's ability to enjoy it recreationally too,
Oh,
because
yeah.
I know the flashiness, as you call it, you have to worry about, can I go canoeing? Is the river high enough? Is it too low? Believe me, trying to kayak on a low river is a lot of work.
And
Well, it becomes
it's
a
pretty
hike.
low right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, it does. You essentially hike dragging the canoe behind you through the
Yeah.
shallow bits.
Through gravel bars.
Yeah,
So-
our spring cleanups are in June, and we always have to be very careful because it's often too high to canoe in safely if you're not a really good canoeist. And then we have a fall cleanup in September, October, and that's focused mainly on tire removal, because the water's low enough so that you can really find those tires.
You can really get down in there.
And you can really get down
The
in
light
there.
trash gets snagged by log jams. So when you pick log jams clean, you get all the lightweight stuff, the floating bottles, things like that. But to get the heavy trash, which is scooted along the bottom by floods, you wait till the water's at an all-time low, and then you can see it and go pluck
Pick
those tires, for instance, out. Metal debris, too.
Now, is that something you do as
Oh,
part
yeah.
of the coordinator for the rivers?
That's something I participate in. I have a trailer load of canoes and some gear,
Okay.
and so we help out groups like
We
Oaks
call
Group.
on him. The Little Miami Watershed Network calls on him often.
I would say, I think in our last episode with you, you were talking about a whole-on statue you found at one point.
Exactly.
What was
exactly.
that? Was that like a garden statue?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember that.
Yeah.
Also, the local liveries always help out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very good supporters.
Awesome.
But it takes the whole community to protect an asset like the Little Miami River. And if we don't protect it, then it turns into the trash sewer system. And it has been in one time. We've really lost an economic recreational driver of the area.
Yeah, I know this is this has to do with Warren County, but it's your adjacent neighbor. There was a study done once. You know, Warren County's major source of income is recreation, turns out. It's not industry or farming or government, as is the
Season
case with
Lake,
many
right?
counties. No, actually, ask yourself, what is the most popular tourist attraction in Warren County for recreation?
I am the wrong person to ask.
It'd be Kings Island,
Oh, okay. Is
right?
that- okay, yep.
Kings Island, several tens of millions of dollars of revenue per year. But
Okay.
then think of the upkeep costs. You've got a big payroll, workers' comp, paving the parking lot. They have new rides swapped in and out every few years. So there's a lot of overhead. The second most important economic generator in the travel and tourism department, which is, as I said, the most important one in Warren County, would be the river corridor. It
Okay.
traverses the county from north to south
Okay.
with the parallel bike trail, and the two of them are magic. And they are in Greene County too.
Yeah.
And they don't ever require being repaved. There's no electric bill associated with them. They just keep rolling along.
You're doing their thing.
But the problem is, the more we restore the river corridor, the more development is attracted to it.
Yeah.
You know,
Because
it's
we
like
wanna
if
live
you
near
build
the
it, they
beautiful
will
areas.
come.
Which
and
makes
they keep
more
coming.
houses and more hardscape and more
Yes.
storm drains.
Which
Yeah.
makes it harder to maintain the river.
Right, and
Exactly.
a storm drain empties that water and it disappears, and so we don't think about it anymore. But it goes into a concrete culvert
Right into the river.
that is like a river and flows faster than the river, as a matter of fact, and it has no way to slow down and nothing to absorb it. So it really enters into the body of water very fast, and with all the pollutants like leaves and dog poop and cigarette butts and whatever else.
It
Hopes
happens to
poop.
pick up on its way in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
think of the pre-settlement condition when you had forest canopy and maybe prairie. Oh, by the way, interesting story. 1751, the Ohio Company of Investors in New York could already see, this was now 5 years before independence, they could already see that the Trans-Appalachian West was going to get settled someday. And just like investors today were thinking, how do we get in on that? So they sent Christopher Gist west
Okay.
with the express purpose. Tell us the disposition of the natives. Tell us about the creeks and how well watered this area
waterways.
is, the quality of the timber, your estimate on the arability of the land. Could it be farmed well? And he produced a travel log. It's a day-by-day description of his travels through our area. And when he talks about Spring Valley and how he spent the whole day traversing a fine meadow, of course it was a prairie, and there were groups of up to 25 buffalo that he passed along the way. That was an area, that was us, yeah, back then. So we had forest canopy and prairie. Rain falls on that, it hits the forest canopy, it hits the understory, the shrub layer, finally into the leaf litter, soaks right into the ground. Prairie can absorb up to a 9-inch rainfall, which we never have. We might have a 5-inch rainfall now, which is really unusual. It's odd, but becoming more and more common. A prairie can absorb all of that with almost zero runoff.
Geez.
Yeah, you've probably heard about the Noop Prairie. It was in the news. It's near the Dayton Airport.
No, but
I
That's
just
another
walked that.
story.
yeah.
Yeah, it's another story. Kind of contentious over there. It's in the Englewood area.
Yeah.
Anyway, I walked that about a year ago, and I could not even find rills where any stormwater was running out of that prairie.
Huh.
It's because those prairie plants, which might be 6 feet tall, may have a 20-foot root system. So by capillary action, the water's just drawn right down to the aquifer. So in the old days, that's where the water went. Well, these days with development, the water shoots right into the river rises, erodes its banks, trees fall in, log jams result, which are a problem for county
Canoeists.
engineers, the township trustees. We really need to think about better land use planning.
Okay.
And we'll have to, I can see we're going to have to do that on another program.
We will.
Oh, goodness.
But that's okay. We kind of got an idea that the river has been here long before us, and if we want the river to continue being something that we have available to us as a community,
It's the
that
goose laying the golden eggs.
we need to take really good care of it
Yeah.
and make sure we understand how important it is to the community. So we're really grateful that you guys are willing to keep coming back out and help us
Oh, yeah.
sort of talk about the river and help everyone else learn about the river. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm grateful you're joining me, and I look forward to hopefully seeing Rebecca so we can talk about water quality.
Oh, yes.
So hopefully that will come up soon.
Yeah, we'll get
But
out into a stream that day.
thank you again for joining me this evening, you guys. I
We
really
enjoyed
had
it.
fun. And thank everybody else for joining us this evening. We hope you enjoyed learning about the Little Miami River history and where it started and how it's become the river we know now. We hope you join us on the next evening, and have a good night.